Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Ontotext's webinar today. I'm Samantha Isdale. I'm a marketing director at Ontotext and really excited that you're all joining us today for a great webinar. The webinar is the top takeaways from Gartner Data Analytics in London, and excited to have our Chief Marketing Officer, Doug Kimball, who actually attended the event, and former Gartner Analyst, Sumit Pal, who is now a strategic solutions director at Ontotext. So really happy to have you join us today, Doug and Sumit, and I will be passing it over to you to talk about the key takeaways.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome everyone. So I would like to have a discussion with Doug in terms of, he was very fortunate to go to the Gartner DNA conference in London. Maybe share with us what his observations were, what he did here, and what were most of the customers and audience talking about.
Cool. Yeah. So first of all, it was a great conference. I mean, the energy at this conference was definitely strong. A lot of activity, a lot of buzz, a lot of traffic, which of course we always appreciated. But yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. It was a really beneficial in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of things we could talk about. I mean, there was a lot of different presentations, a lot of topics, a lot of interesting material, but I want to focus on just kind of three, and then again, want to get your opinion from your perspective on these things, Sumit. But I heard a lot about data fabric, a little bit about data mesh, but a lot about data fabric and a lot of presentations. We heard a lot about data sharing and data products, and so really keen to get your perspectives on that as well. But what I also heard was less of a focus on the technology, which is surprising sometimes, and more of why are we doing all these things that we're doing? So business, business focus, outcomes focus. What is the need behind that? So let me start with data fabric. Again, a hot topic, a lot of buzzwords behind that, as well as data mesh. But I think I sat through 3 different presentations around data fabric. A lot of growth in interest. The one I went to with Etishem Zaidi, packed room, probably 400 people in the room, and there was standing room as well. And I like how he built out the structure of it and the fact that a data fabric is a concept, it is a paradigm, it's a way of addressing the idea of connecting and interconnecting all the different data sources that a organization has. Put your metadata layer there, then you put your knowledge graph process on top of that, and he called out Ontotext, which was very rewarding. And then you build everything out from there. What I found very intriguing about both his presentation and Afriz Jaffrey's presentation was, again, how they tied all of the ideas together about bringing data producers together with data consumers. The data consumers don't really care where the data comes from, how it's processed, what format it is. They're just trying to solve for something. So I thought that, no massively new insights, because this has been out there for a while, but the way that they continue to reinforce that a data fabric isn't something you just walk up and you buy off the shelf, even though Microsoft had a recent announcement. It's not something that you buy off the shelf. You have to have a plan and a structure behind that and get that metadata layer, those semantics, and then put the knowledge graphs in the next part of that in order to start to bring together all those data sources to be able to query it, to analyze it, to understand it and find it. So that's what I saw. But again, I know that you have had a lot of research and perspectives on this. I'd love to hear, from your side, Sumit, what you think about data fabric.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Thank you for sharing all the insights and what you did, what you heard in the conference. Yes, during my time at Gartner, of late, I was covering data lakes, lake houses. But then of late, about the last year and a half or so, a lot of the questions the customers were getting into was more around, should I use a data fabric? Should I use a data mesh? And in my opinion, that's a wrong question to ask, which tells me that the industry is sort of confusing the customers rather than giving them confidence. I think customers are getting confused. The organizations and enterprises are getting confused because, according to my research, what I feel is data fabric and data mesh should complement each other. They are not competing technologies, but they are complementing technologies, right? And One of the major reasons I think data fabric comes into the picture today is over the last about 5-6 years, we have been talking about data lakes, consolidating all the data. And when we talk about consolidation, it means you're moving data from one place to the other, right? Whether it's from on-premises to the cloud or from one cloud to the other. And moving data, in my opinion, is a bad thing, right? Because you are creating another data silo. You are increasing the surface area for your data breaches because now you have another copy. You don't know what's the access control. And then whenever you move data, you need to have another layer now to sync up the data so that they are not out of sync. And that's where data fabric comes as a overarching kind of a layer, overarching kind of a technology or a way of thinking where you let data sit where it is rather than moving and consolidating. Let the data fabric handle the connections from your data consumers to the data producers. And the fabric is what knits together all the different data sources. Now, that's a complex thing, right? Saying it is very easy, but in an organizational setting, it can become very challenging, very difficult, right? And that is where I think the metadata layer, the master data management layer, along with help from a knowledge graph is very vital, where the knowledge graph has information about the semantics of the data that is hidden and stored across these different silos. Now, data fabric is still a very abstract concept, right? In certain aspects, there are certain set of organizations who have been doing data fabric, who have their own metadata layer that they are trying to stitch together these different pieces, right? And I think that's where the next set of things that you heard, data sharing, data contracts, building data products, comes in, right? There are certain vendors who are saying, we support data fabric. For example, Informatica, there is another company called Cinchy, C-I-N-C-H-Y. And Informatica, for example, leverages its own already built-in tools for metadata management, for data catalog management, to provide that abstraction with a data fabric. So that's how certain customers or certain vendors are implementing it. But again, there is no one principle that data fabric or one particular product that you can go and buy and say, I am data fabricated or things like that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's all about really connecting. And I use the term data threads because, as you know, I like to think conceptually. But to me, a data thread is a good way to visualize this because, as again, the end consumer, you just want to solve and get something answered. So you connect your data thread throughout the fabric. I'm glad you brought up data lakes because I know in previous roles I've heard data lakes as a need. And I really like what you said. You don't want to move data around. You don't want to get your data all messy. And I used to make the joke that the reason I think a data lake is not so good. Imagine you wanted to, our data pool. You put a straw in. You only want to get out one particular piece of water from that particular data lake or data pool. You can't do it. And so when you talk about semantics and organizing the data, that's where you start to get the value. Data lakes are good by themselves. You have to have a place to have your information stored and organized, but it has to be organized and accessible and searchable, etc. So good point. And also the security, I think provenance is another big piece that I think where data fabrics come into play, as well as the data sharing I want to mention in a second, is having that ability to ensure that you've got quality and traceability of your data so that you understand, is this trustable? I mean, trustable data is the basis of what we need to do for everything. So good point. Data sharing. So let's keep that whole concept going. So again, at an abstract level, data fabric is about data sharing at one level. There's much more than that. But again, it's the presentation I did at the conference was about Lego as a concept around for data, etc. When you have data sharing and data connections, you then can create data products. And so if I take that same concept further, I heard a lot about what is it, and even in talking to prospects who came up to talk to us at the booth, when I asked questions around what are you trying to accomplish and what are the challenges, why have you come to speak to us, it ultimately came down to they're trying to create data products for their business units. And that's why I really enjoyed the conversations that were less about the techie details and the pieces, and more solving for the business challenges, what the CDO is coming to them say, let's solve for. Data products continue to be coming up there. And at least 3 of the presentations, again, I went to talked about the importance of finding ways to share data across an enterprise, bring in external data so that you can share those insights, you can enrich that data that you get from your organization to deliver more informed and more powerful data products and more trusted data products. That also seemed to resonate. But again, I think not just hearing it from Gartner, which is of course very valuable, but also hearing it from the types of conversations we were having, where it was truly about getting this information into people's hands, the users' hands, as a data product, putting that ownership, going back again to data fabric and data mesh, decentralized ownership. So you have your domain owners who know the knowledge, understand that data best, should maintain that data the best. Looking at it from my perspective, I need information from multiple domains, have that data product being pulled together. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely right. And that is where, data sharing becomes so important, and the concept of data products, right? Data products they're typically ideally built on top of a data mesh, right? The whole concept of data contracts, data sharing, data products are like the side effects or the side things that you gain from doing a data mesh or bringing a data mesh based approach. Because one of the reasons why data mesh is a thought provoking as well as thought changing way of doing data in an organization, big organization, is to decentralize. Because of late, what was happening was, for most organizations, data engineering teams were getting bottlenecked. They had too much of work to do to bring in data from multiple sources and provide the data, do the transformation, ETL, ELT, the different types of workloads to the end consumers. And data engineering teams got bottlenecked. Now, the data mesh concept tries to eliminate or mitigate the bottlenecks by building decentralized teams, the same concept we get from software development or software products, where products are developed based on certain domain-specific or microservices-based architectures, right? Where you have full stack teams that are handling a particular domain, where they have domain experts who know the domain, they are domain data experts who know the data for that domain, and then they are experts who can build the technology side, right? And yes, Doug, I very much resonate with you in terms of, I think just talking about technology by itself is a good brainstorming exercise, but technology not combined with right kind of business use case can lead to really disastrous results. And that's why a lot of the initial data lake implementations were failing, because organizations thought, oh, data lake is cheap storage, let's bring in data and then we'll figure out what the problem we are going to solve, right? It was a very bottom-up approach. We need to have a good top-down as well as a bottom-up approach. Now, coming back to your thought about data sharing, right? Now, once we decentralize our data teams through the data mesh paradigm and have these different data teams who are building different products, a lot of cases where these teams need to share data, right? Common data, master data, reference data. And that is where a data sharing platform becomes important. And you will see that because now you see a lot of the cloud vendors as well as a lot of data platforms. Databricks has Delta Sharing Protocol, which is a protocol for sharing data across different teams with access controls and governance. Snowflake has a data sharing platform. All the cloud vendors also have marketplaces and data sharing where you can share data internally or externally. And then this leads to the next part, which is the data contracts aspect, right? Data sharing can be done in multiple ways, right? They can be either API-based sharing, they can be file-based sharing, table-based sharing. But in order for those teams to ensure that what I'm sharing is correct according to the specification, they need to have data contracts, where data contracts are signatures saying, I want data in this format. These are the fields. This is my precision. This is my date format, right? Ideally, we know all this, but it's been done in such an ad hoc way all over the years that we need a specific way to handle this. And this is where, again, knowledge graphs become very important, where knowledge graphs can help you to ensure consistency of your data as the data flows through the organization. Ensure that the data is of high quality based on semantics, based on the kind of automated machine learning techniques that knowledge graph platforms use to ensure that your data is clean, good, because again, otherwise it's garbage in, garbage out, right?
Right. Yeah, and I agree. The knowledge, obviously, the knowledge graph is a core interest of ours, but it's not just an interest. But we continue to see during these presentations at Gartner where knowledge graph was mentioned as a foundational part of basically any data management, any data architecture project practice being put out there, and at the enterprise level especially. But we also had conversations with prospects, and I had a short conversation with the Gartner Analyst about this. In short, the question was: is our knowledge graphs only important to medium to large organizations? And my response was no. I think a knowledge graph may have a larger implication on an enterprise, but small companies, especially those who are maybe even in startup mode, bringing a knowledge graph into their technology stack to help them build, for one thing, or even smaller to medium-sized companies who are going to have a lot of data usage, that knowledge graph allows them to have, to your point, those interconnections, that semantic layer to drive reasoning and inferences so they gain more insights from the data that they have. I mean, I truly do think that generally a knowledge graph as a foundational layer is important to any company, and any vertical and any horizontal. Really, there's an impact. We saw the same kind of message, although and I think I shared with you earlier. I talk a lot about knowledge graph being invisible. We're not always visible. We're kind of a behind the scenes thing. Well, that's okay, because if you're not there, it's a problem. Let me take that into the big thread again. And by the way, I want to mention AI and GPT. I'm going to cover that at the very end, so don't forget. But I'm going to make sure I come back to that. And as I mentioned, it wasn't as much always about the technology, and I appreciate your echo there. People would come up and they would ask questions about, how do you do? And that's why I'd grab our product guy and they would do the how. But I'd say the vast majority of conversations are, what do you do? How do you solve for? And us asking the questions, what are the challenges you're trying to get to? And I really welcomed that. And also, again, during the Gartner presentations, there was a lot of a move, and I saw this also at the Orlando conference, a lot of move from the heavy technology focus of data solving problems to recognizing that we need to continue to educate the C-level audience, or the senior level audience, that data management isn't just, and I think you said this more or less, isn't just a technology problem. I mean, it's a cultural thing. It is a quality thing. It's an enterprise. It's a mindset thing that having data isn't enough. We went through the era of big data, and now we're in small and wide data. Data isn't the problem. How we manage it, use it, share it, access it, all those happy buzzwords, that's where the challenge is. And again, why are we doing this? We went through the whole Hadoop era, and that didn't really go very well. But again, if we don't know why we're starting a project, why we're starting an effort, and that's where, again, a lot of the very positive conversations I was having with prospects really led towards that. What are you trying to solve for? And you can see sometimes their eyes light up. Like, let me tell you my use case. And it's like, that's, use case driven data solutions are far more likely to succeed than, well, I've got to install X or Y or Z. Now, again, I'm a business-minded person, but again, would like to get your feedback on that as well, Sumit.
Yeah, absolutely, spot on, Doug, and I agree with you. And I am also of that philosophy. I myself, I'm a very techie guy, but I always, try to go more from a top-down perspective. Technology by itself is fine. Technology is also very complex today, right? Mm-hmm. And I was reading a few days back that, our civilization may collapse just because things have become so complex, right? Mm-hmm. and the author was talking about the collapse of the Roman Empire, and one of the reasons was its complexity, right? So technology is complex. Technology is complex, but again, technology should be, used for the right use cases. It should be more use case driven, and that's why, as you brought in the very fundamental, most important part, the process, the culture aspect, the data literacy aspect of it, right? Yes, you can have swathes of data, right? But if the personas in your organization are data blind, they don't have the desire to understand the data. That data has in fact, no meaning, right? The value of the data is really diminishes, and that's why data literacy has become such an important thing. And I'm sure you may have heard certain talks or things around data literacy. When I was at Gartner, there was a lot of effort. A lot of analysts were putting, writing out documents to literate people about data literacy, right? To make sure that you know what is data literacy, especially from the C-level. And again, coming back to the aspect of culture and organization, data mesh itself is like a culture. It's like a process. It's not just technology. It's how you organize your teams so that the friction is reduced and you have a much better path for outcomes from the data, not the data itself or the technology itself, right? That's why in data mesh, they removed the complex parts from the domain. They are sort of absolving the data teams. Don't worry about the technology. There is a central team that will handle the technology aspects, infrastructure provisioning your ingestion tools, right? The data teams or the data product teams will just use self-service based ways to access the technology aspects of it, right? And that's why, data strategy is also such an important part, which should come more from a top down, right? Because if you don't have a data strategy, then you just have a technology strategy, you are again, fishing in the dark, right? And data strategy needs a couple of things. It needs a technology strategy. It needs a cloud strategy. What is your infrastructure, which is again related more to technology. So yes, these are things, and I think a lot of people are getting fatigued with so many buzzwords, as I was saying earlier, right? We should be providing confidence rather than creating confusion around these buzzwords, and making sure that develop a data strategy, develop a data literacy programs, rather than just thinking about technology. That's my thoughts on that.
I know we all get into the buzzword bingo thing, and there are times to pay attention to the buzzwords because they are they have an impact in the market. And you talk about data literacy. Text analytics is another thing I've often looked at for using that data literacy so you can understand how to find that information in all those texts that we create. So that's another thing I did hear about. But I want to close it up with a couple of buzzword pieces just to check that box. I don't want to sum this up. I want to make sure we keep this short. But I appreciate what you said. But it's interesting. We went there, as Ontotext with, keeping in mind all these things around ChatGPT, generative AI, large language models, etc. Nobody came up to us at the booth to bring up those as leading topics, which could have been, our booth, could have been the person in general. And obviously there were, plenty of sessions on these buzzwordy topics, but I had people coming to us more to talk about, as I said, the challenges that they're looking at. And if I brought up things like AI, oh yeah, we've got AI initiatives. We need to get the summary is we have to get our data projects right first, our data management efforts first, before we plan for anything AI or one lady actually said, before we plan for anything fancy like all that AI stuff, which I thought was kind of funny.
Correct.
But it also really resonated the fact that there's no question, the impact that large language models are having on the industry and ChatGPT and all those things. They are very powerful, and we need to respect that. And obviously at Ontotext, we're responding to that as well. But I also think there is that, to your point, there's that balance between buzzword bingo and let's actually do something. As we wrap up, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think I missed one point, which was about that invisible layer you talked about, knowledge graph. So let me just clarify that. And I think that's a very strong point, that knowledge graphs knowledge graphs are pervasive now, right? We use knowledge graphs every day. Whenever we go to Google engine and search, or any engine we search, we are using knowledge graphs. When you use Alexa and things like that, it's using knowledge graphs in the back, right? It's just like when you browse a website and do a secured login, the whole cryptography framework is working invisibly in the background, so much mathematics and things like that. And I think knowledge graph has that power, or has those capabilities to become the invisible layer. A lot of data catalogs, for example, are powered by knowledge graphs. MDM tools are powered by knowledge graphs, right? So knowledge graph has the capability to, sort of permeate across a lot of different technologies. Now, coming back to your question about generative AI and ChatGPT, yes, there is a lot of buzz around it. But again, I think a lot of the organizations are looking at low-hanging fruits with ChatGPT. Think about maybe 10, 12 years back when cloud first came in. Most organizations were thinking about cloud is just storage and compute, right? I get EC2 instances and I get some storage on S3, right? But then we evolved beyond that. Then cloud evolved beyond that into totally doing your end-to-end applications, right? I think ChatGPT and generative AI have that potential, where right now we're only looking at very low-hanging fruits in terms of, okay, translating my queries or looking at my data and building the queries, right? Or query generators, right? But I think data engineering, there are a lot of areas where ChatGPT and AI can help in streamlining. But again, we come down to the fact that it's very technology specific, right? And as you said, I'm happy someone came and told to you that we need to get our data right first before we think about AI, right? Because again, it's the garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have good quality data, if you don't have good quality of data, anything else downstream will fail, right? Will not help your business. Having good, right data quality, having the right kind of master data, which is, consistent and standardized, is the core part of it. And after a while, I think, yes, ChatGPT plugins and things like that will make things much easier going downstream a few years down the line from your data engineering perspective. But I think there are areas that needs to be sort of corrected in terms of hallucinations. We cannot rely on something that is 80% of the time correct, right? We need to make sure that it's correct all the time, because we cannot. In a data pipeline,
making decisions on 80% good enough is not good enough.
Is not good enough. Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, and that invisible layer, I shared that thread with you from an earlier conversation, and I used a similar thread when I was trying to explain knowledge graphs. Comparing it to basically we done right, we are invisible. We are behind the scenes. We are fundamentally a boring piece of technology that just sits there, but without it, so many of your critical business operations cannot be handled and solved for. So, Sumit, great chatting with you. Appreciate your feedback. As I said, it was a great conference. Really enjoyed it. A lot of good connections, a lot of good conversations. I continue to learn every time. So again, I encourage you. So thank you for watching our webinar. Appreciate you everybody showing up and attending this. Please continue to follow us. We'll have more conversations like this coming up. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear your questions. And with that, Samantha, over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Doug and Sumit. This was so insightful, and I hope everybody watching the webinar feels the same way. A lot of good conversations between you two. And like Doug said, please follow us on LinkedIn. Go to our website for more information, and we have a plethora of knowledge, ontotext.com. And if you're interested in continuing to join webinars and get updates and more information from us, feel free to subscribe to our marketing emails. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Have a good day.